Okay, I am going to start off with showing you a short little video clip from America's Got Talent that moved me to my core.
Hello. Welcome to America's Got Talent.
Thank you.
What's your name?
My name is Alan.
And where are you from, Alan?
I was born in Brazil. But I'm proud to be an American citizen, so.
I'm noticing behind you that you have silks. What got you into this kind of act?
Well, I come from a circus family, so I love to perform, but people always told me that I should just be a clown because of my size.
Oh.
I've been bullied my entire life, and people judge me for my appearance, so I'm a little bit nervous about that too.
Don't be nervous about that here. Dream to have your own Vegas show?
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit, and, you know, dreams come true.
Good for you. Well, we're all wishing you well, Alan. Be safe.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Here we go. Go Papa.
Go, Papa.
Oh.
I was born in a thunderstorm.
Oh my God. Look how high and no net.
Overnight,
Oh my goodness.
I played alone, I played on my own. I survived.
I've seen this several times. I hope the volume was okay. In the test run, it was a little bit louder, but this man, Alan Silva, moves me. He inspires me. Despite being discouraged, despite being bullied for his physical stature. Alan went deep within his being, and he transcended persecution. And he soared not only to new physical heights, literally, but he soared emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We seem to have an all too common human experience of persecution, centuries old, of condemning people based on their race, their creed, their age, their sexual orientation, their physical orientation, and so on. Last December, my daughter-in-law to-be, Suzanne, who is pictured there on the right, went into Philadelphia with her sister to do some Christmas shopping. Now, Suzanne is a Muslim, and while they were shopping, they came across demonstrators. And in the name of Jesus, we were also supposed to disavow Muslims and all the other groups of people, which I will not name. It is there for you. And I can remember that day, her texting me and asking me, is this what Jesus believes? You know, and we had a nice dialogue and a conversation, and it brought us closer together, in understanding. Unfortunately, this is not the first time Suzanne was persecuted for being Muslim. Her first memory of being condemned was when she was about 8 or 9 years old. It was a couple days after 9/11, and she was in school. And somehow or another, discussion ensued within the class, and it was discovered, as one student asked her, she was a Muslim because of the color of her skin, and it was a very heightened thing at that time, or that Muslims were terrorists. And with that, the student began to shout out and said, "Duck, Suzanne's gonna shoot us, she's gonna bomb us, she's a terrorist." You know, the teacher did her best to try to calm everything and have a teaching moment. But it was in that moment, at least for lots of years, that she decided that she would not reveal that she was Muslim because it wasn't safe. And as my son and her began dating and began to get serious and their relationship deepened, she was going to break off the relationship. She didn't really know our family, and she said to him, "You know, I'm really afraid to meet your family. I have had some bad experiences with the gentlemen, the men that I used to date, and maybe you'd be better off like marrying a Caucasian, or perhaps even a Caucasian who's Italian." And I remember my son reassuring her, and she was quite nervous. And I am so grateful that she decided to be vulnerable and to meet our family. And she is a beautiful light, and we have reached a deepening of our relationship and an understanding. And I am so proud to call her my daughter. So each one of us here, at some point or another in our lives, have been persecuted, been judged. So if you would, in the chat box, if you feel free to share, just briefly write something that you are persecuted or judged for. And James is just going to randomly share with me 3, and then during fellowship, if you'd like to expand on that, we will. Okay, being a white male, being Jewish. Yes. Being overweight, being German, being a woman, judged by my religion, being gay, having a same-sex partner who is much older than I am, being poor, being shy, wearing glasses. And we can see all of us in whatever shape or form have experienced persecution of some form. And persecution is the topic of our last beatitude that we will be sharing together. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so like I've done with all the other beatitudes, we've taken a look at what this means. We've looked at it from the religious lens, the metaphysical lens, and the mystical wisdom traditions. So at first glance, from the religious context, right, to be persecuted was to be a virtue. That's what righteous was defined as. It was interchangeable. Righteousness was virtuous. And so this beatitude was interpreted that it was righteous and virtuous to be a martyr. So if you are a martyr, like the master teacher Jesus was, you will be rewarded in the afterlife. So let's see where this might have come to be the common belief or the religious moral code. So Jesus was before his time, and actually his teachings, a lot of people of our day, we can say it is before our time, so to speak, or just cannot be fully lived to the depths of what Jesus was teaching. So his teachings of the divinity of humanity and the sacred worth of everyone, not just depending on what race or creed or how much money you had, was the basis of his teachings. And the Beatitudes and all of his teachings were about not moral code, not living a religious letter of the law life, but being changed from the inside. Knowing that the spiritual law is about moving from appearance, knowing our divinity, and being transformed in consciousness. This was a threat during Jesus's day. He didn't just come in to say, hey, I'm going to be a martyr. You know, I'm just going to come in and, like people say, you know, some religious traditions say that he came in to be crucified. No, he came in to teach about our divinity, about our transformation of consciousness, and he lived that and knew that to his core, and his connection to ascend in consciousness was high, like many of the masters, right? This was misunderstood. This was threatening to the Roman Empire. And because he spoke truth to power and didn't decide to stuff his teachings, didn't decide to hide, so to speak, his light under a bushel, it was threatening. And because it was blasphemy to teach that anybody other than those in the high places in the Roman Empire were God and nobody else, the punishment or the persecution was crucifixion. So that is a little bit of where people have thought that about martyrdom was really what he was trying to teach. So now as we look at the metaphysical lens of the righteousness and persecution, and again, here metaphysical is, persecution is when we harshly judge, condemn, or hurt anyone or ourselves when we fail to see the divinity. Now, when I speak of consciousness of oneness, I do not mean sameness. We are all unique expressions of the divine, but at the core, we are still divine. At the core, we all have the power and the dominion to create our reality based on where we are operating in consciousness. And so also, righteousness is defined as right thinking. Again, we're seeing a little hint of that in the metaphysics of that duality. When we get into the mystical, it's oneness. So right thinking here is defined as an attitude in consciousness that affirms the truth of one's divinity, regardless of our trials in life. This is important. Regardless of what's happening out there, all of that, and it can get tough. We know that, and so regardless of what is happening, we do not abandon living from our divine nature. We follow the wisdom, whatever that may be. And in Discover the Power Within You, Eric Butterworth states about righteousness, when we are tempted to hold the wrong thoughts about ourselves, others, or situation, we give way to fear or anger, and we are persecuted for quote unquote righteousness. We are in a struggle within ourselves, and we are being persecuted by our own lower nature when we buy into that we are enough, that we are less than. And so, how do we transcend this persecution consciousness? How do we move beyond? How do we, regardless of our trials, live from that space of inner guidance? So it is about ascending to a higher octave in consciousness. And I know I talk about this frequently. I want to talk about dimensions. You know, I am studying this class called Soul Mastery, and at some point, maybe I will do a series on that, and talks about the dimensions of consciousness. And I have talked about the torsional fields, that we are vibrational beings, that what we are vibrating out, the frequency and the energy of our thoughts, our beliefs, and our action have an energy and a frequency. So if you think of the an octave on the piano, we have lower octaves and we have higher octaves. They're not right or wrong, they just are. They have a different frequency, different sound. So if we look at third dimensional, that is being in this physical experience. It is about the physical, the material world. When we are in third dimensional consciousness, we are in the thinking of me and my rights. We see a lot of this happening among us. And I'm not just saying this to be persecuting anybody, but it's an observation. When we see people yelling and screaming that it's my right not to have a mask. I mean, not to wear a mask, and me, mine, and we move over to the higher dimensions, we start to think about, well, how does my actions impact other people, right? And we also, to some extent, when it can be, and again, just putting it out there as an observation I have had, when we talk about like herd immunity, there needs to be, what, 60, 70, 80% of the population who has an immunity to the COVID-19. Right now, Here in the United States, we're about maybe between 6 and 10%. And so when we're willing to say, as maybe within my own white privilege, not thinking about how it impacts older generations, not thinking about how it inflicts people who have compromised immune systems, not thinking about how people of color, the death rate is 2 to 3 times higher than those of Caucasian. So that might be a nice thing for me to say or to aspire by, but when I start to think about, yes, we are still in this physical reality, and I start to question how what I am thinking and wanting might affect other people, maybe I would choose again. Then we look at duality from the third dimension. There's right or wrong. It's polarities, Republican, Democrat. There's no American. There is different religions, different skin colors. Again, those are all sacred blessings to be unique expressions, but they are not meant to be debated, argued, and condemned and persecuted. When we are in third dimensional thinking, we are in victim consciousness. I am victim of the world I see, the Course in Miracles says. I don't believe that I have the power to rise above like Alan Silver did and my daughter-in-law Suzanne did, in deciding that she was going to be a successful woman and not allow herself to cower and to think she was worthless. Also, in third dimensional thinking, our faith is placed in the intellect and in our 5 senses. If we can't see it, taste it, touch it, feel it, it is not real. When we are in third dimensional experience, we are in resistance and retaliation. The eye for an eye, it is the Moses code, the moral code. And we can see that the fourth dimension starts to bridge, because fifth dimensional is where we get into where the masters are. I am that I am, and I live from that place. But fourth dimension is that bridge as we walk between the worlds. We are still in this physical third reality, so I am going to experience that. And I know the truth that I am an ascended master, and in fourth dimension, we begin to bridge over. We move to know that the inner world is more important, the world behind my eyes, the invisible realm. We move to, well, not just how is this going to affect me, but we and ours and our good. I need to understand beyond my own limited experience, how does this impact the whole? We become open and we become consciously neutral. If you studied, well, I think, Michael Singer, okay, talks about becoming the observer. When we can reach that space after deep breathing, after going within, we reach that place of neutrality. You know, it's not necessarily always peace, but it's that place of stillness. And in fourth dimensional, I move from being a victim to know that I am victor. You know, I can manifest something. I can manifest a parking spot. I can manifest a life partner. And then we move into vessel. Well, use me. I am a vessel of divine light. And we know in fourth dimension, I have dominion. That everything I hold in consciousness, thought, word, deed, and emotion creates my experience. Not just my experience, but the world around me. And so I choose wisely. And then when we get into that fifth dimensional, we are that verity consciousness, which is that I am. Where is our faith pointed when we are in fourth dimension? When we drop to our hearts, when we pray, when we meditate, when we ask for that divine guidance, despite here what is going on. Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Do I abandon my teachings? Do I abandon speaking truth to power, or do I continue? And then you follow the guidance. And then we move from resistance and retaliation to allowing, where we know that there is a higher purpose. I don't like what's happening here in this COVID experience. I don't like it. It pains me to see people of color being killed, having the life choked out of them. And it's sometimes so hard to see this, that makes sense. So how do I move to such a higher place and surrender to the mystery? So when we begin to go into the fourth dimension, this quote really encapsulates placing, moving beyond, because with our third dimensional self, it does not make sense. Whether you pushed me or pulled me, drained me or fueled me, stayed by my side or left me, loved me or hated me, hurt me or helped me, you are a part of my growth, and I thank you. Take that in. Cannot affirm that, cannot live that if we are in third dimensional consciousness. So how do we move to that higher octave? So if you just put in the chat box a couple of ideas. How do we move to that higher octave? How do you shift? Anybody have any ideas? Prayer and gratitude, breath, meditation, awesome. Meditation again, nature, yes, being in the stillness of nature, observing my emotions, understanding that I am in the world, but not of it, beautiful, stillness, compassion, forgiveness, kindness, by reading about and contemplating divine truth, empathy. Yes, I knew already that you were all divine masters. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so I'm just going to share a little bit about going to that higher octave, which is really what all the Beatitudes are all about. And they can kind of be summarized into 4, even though they're 8, we can condense them down into 4, where we're willing to release the ego. Not that we don't hear it, know it, because we are in this world. We will always experience it, but we don't fight with it. But we know with our dominion that we can tame the lower vibrational thoughts, right? When I'm hating on somebody, I can notice I'm hating on somebody, okay? And I'm willing to drop that or ascend to a higher place. And then the next is that desire to go to that higher place, to live in the aliveness of divine realm, knowing that what I am seeing has such power over me and I need to choose again. And then 3, our desire as we to connect with our heart, with our breath and prayer and meditation and empathy and love and all the kindness, all the things that you spoke of. As we go to the seat of our heart in holy union, we allow each breath, as I did with the sun emanating from our heart, whatever visual, breathing in and out, affirming truth, those all help to expand your heart and open you to that higher octave. And in that stillness, when we listen, we receive divine guidance. Divine guidance. Whether it is Martin Luther King saying, I believe this belongs to you. And so the whole path in summary of these Beatitudes is about liberation and consciousness. Because we are living, as long as we're having a physical body here, we will experience the physical world, but I do have hope and believe that we will use our power not to hate, destroy, but use it to co-create, not just with the divine, but with each other. I believe that is part of what this awakening is about, and we all must move from the me to the we and ask how we may serve. This path of the liberation consciousness is what the true meaning of freedom is. And so I just wanted to share with you, all of us at some point have risen above our persecution. And I've shared some stories here. I've shared the story of Alan Silva. I have shared the story of my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, Suzanne. In the song, we heard of Martin Luther King, and another individual who transcended difficult circumstances and persecution was Anne Frank. It was one of my, when I was teaching in 8th grade, no matter how many years I would teach it, we would go, teach it, and she would move me such. If you ever read her full diary and know a little bit about her life, where she, as a young lady who was Jewish during World War II, her mom, her dad, her sister Margot, and another family, a mom, dad, and another adolescent, and a dentist friend, all went into hiding, into this tiny attic, and they were there for 2 years trying to be safe from persecution, being captured. They were not allowed to make noise, flush the toilet, their food supply was scarce. And Otto Frank, Anne's father, would always say to her, they cannot place chains on your thinking. And you see within her diary the transformation of consciousness in this young woman, from talking about all the fights, about her going into, adolescence and the changing of her body and all her disagreements with her mom and all of that normal adolescent stuff, and also feeling like the fear of the bombing that was going on around her. And I think the transformation of consciousness can be glimpsed in this last quote. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet if I look up into the heavens, I think it will all come right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. Just want to go to this last quote, which is in the wisdom teachings. Cynthia Bagalt talks about the mystical meanings of these Beatitudes. Anne Frank was able to live this. So in the Gospel of Thomas, they give another interpretation of the 8th Beatitude, and it goes like this. Blessed are you in the midst of persecution, who when they hate and pursue you, even to the core of your being, cannot find you anywhere. Talk about freedom. Whatever this elixir of pure liberation may be, it is what the journey of the Beatitudes is all about. And that you there means the third dimensional personality self, where you no longer identify yourself as small and all of the labels that society would place on you. It is something, again, that cannot make sense from our third dimensional thinking. So my friends, may we know from our own experiences of transcendence and moving above persecution and all of these stories that I've shared with you today, may you come to understand the true liberation of consciousness. Namaste.